The music was flowing, the room was warm, and Dean Martin was doing what he had done 1,000 times before, owning the moment. Then, without warning, everything stopped. Not the applause, not the crowd, but him. Mid-performance, mid-breath, he froze, eyes locked on someone he hadn't planned to see. You can feel it, can't you? That sudden shift when confidence gives way to something quieter, heavier, human. This was Dean Martin at the height of his power, a man who never lost control of a stage, choosing to pause in front of everyone. No explanation, no apology, just silence stretching a second too long. People leaned forward, unsure if this was part of the act or something far more personal. And that's the moment that matters, because legends don't stop unless something deeper pulls them out of rhythm. Somewhere in that crowd was a presence strong enough to break through fame, lights, and muscle memory. Someone who changed the trajectory of the night before a single word was spoken. And once you know who that person was, you realize this wasn't just a pause. It was the beginning of a decision that would ripple far beyond that room forever onward. Dean Martin didn't just perform, he inhabited a space in a way that made it his own. When he walked onto a stage, there was a certainty in every step, a calm authority that settled the room before the music even began. He wasn't just a singer, he was a presence, someone whose laughter, his effortless charm, and the casual tilt of a hat could command attention without demanding it. People didn't come to see him sing, they came to experience him, to witness someone who seemed untouchable, unshakable, a master of rhythm and charisma. For years, he had done this in every city, every club, every grand hall. The applause followed him naturally like the tide following the moon, never forced, always deserved. He had that rare combination of talent and ease that made it look simple, even when it was extraordinary. And yet, it wasn't only talent that drew people to him. It was his control of the moment, the way he could bend time on stage. Nothing ever stopped him. No distraction, no whisper from the crowd, no unexpected sound could break the flow of Dean Martin. He was untouchable because he had learned to move with the rhythm of the world, to anticipate, to glide. But on this night, something in the room shifted, something subtle but undeniable. There was a presence in the audience that carried a weight he hadn't felt before, a force that, despite the glow of stage lights and the comfort of routine, demanded attention. It was the kind of presence that made even the most confident pause, that made the world slow for just a heartbeat. This was a man who had mastered pauses as part of his act, yet this one was different, unplanned, charged with meaning. Everyone around him would later say they felt it, the subtle tension that seemed to hum just beneath the surface, a quiet signal that something remarkable was about to happen. And Dean, ever perceptive, ever attuned, recognized it immediately. He felt the difference, the way a single human could shift the energy of an entire room without saying a word. It was in that moment, that rare intersection of fame and vulnerability, that the ordinary became extraordinary.
He remained composed, but inside a recognition stirred, one that hinted at an encounter far beyond any performance, far beyond any song. That night, the rules he had always lived by, the effortless flow he relied on, were about to meet an exception. And as the audience leaned forward, sensing the change, the unthinkable settled into the air. Something this night would be different. Something that even Dean Martin, with all his control and effortless grace, could not predict or ignore. It was in that quiet, in that pause, that the story began to take its true shape, a story that would ripple far beyond the spotlight, far beyond applause, carrying with it the weight of a single choice and the presence of someone extraordinary who demanded to be seen. And then it happened. A shift so subtle that many in the audience didn't notice at first, yet once it settled, it could not be ignored. Dean Martin, mid-song, mid-laugh, mid-moment, paused. His hand hovered in the air, a chord half struck, a word unsaid, and suddenly the room felt smaller, tighter, suspended. You could almost feel the heartbeat of every person in that hall, stretching, holding, waiting. Everyone noticed it, even those who had come expecting just another flawless performance. Something was wrong, or perhaps something was right, but different. His eyes, usually soft, casual, confident, sharpened in a way that sent an electric ripple across the audience. He wasn't looking at the crowd as a whole. He was looking at one point, one person, and in that gaze, a story began to unfold that no one else could see. Silence fell, not forced, but inevitable, as if the music itself had taken a step back, yielding space to the weight of recognition. It was in the smallest details, a slight tilt of the head, a pause in the breath, the way he shifted his stance ever so slightly, that hinted this was no ordinary interruption. The usual rhythm of the night, the comfort of expectation had been broken, replaced by something taut, something deliberate. And yet, even in the pause, he carried the calm that had defined him, a control that made the interruption feel purposeful rather than chaotic. Questions filled the air without being spoken. Why this person? Why now? What could be so important that Dean Martin, untouchable, unshakable, would allow it to seize him mid-performance? The uncertainty spread through the room like a whisper, invisible but palpable. Each second stretched longer than the last, and every eye was drawn to the same point, trying to anticipate what would happen, trying to catch a hint of the story that only Dean seemed to understand. It was a lesson in presence, in the power of noticing, in the subtle gravity that a single human can have in a moment otherwise ruled by spectacle. And yet the answer remained out of reach, suspended between the pause and the resumption, teasing the audience, holding them on the edge of understanding. In that moment, everything else, the applause, the lights, the music, faded into background, and the world seemed to tilt toward one individual, one connection that would define not just the night, but something far larger. It was the kind of interruption that makes time feel elastic, that stretches seconds into eternity, and reminds you that even the most composed, most in-command figures can be touched, altered, moved by something utterly unexpected. And still the resolution did not come. The question lingered, heavy and insistent. Who was this person, and why had they caused Dean Martin, of all people, to pause mid-performance, leaving the audience suspended in collective anticipation, hearts racing, unable to look away?
And then the reason for the pause became clear, though not immediately in words. It was the presence of someone whose life had intersected with his in a way that carried weight far beyond applause or fame. Not a fan, not a critic, but a person whose struggles and victories Dean had witnessed quietly, privately, long before the lights and music shaped the world's perception of him. For a man who had mastered charm and effortless grace, this moment was a confrontation with something far more human, vulnerability laid bare, a reminder that even those who seem untouchable are touched by connection, by empathy, by shared history. The figure in the crowd carried a story that Dean recognized instantly, a silent narrative written in posture, in the catch of a breath, in the eyes that met his with unspoken acknowledgement. In that instant, the spotlight was irrelevant, the applause meaningless. All that mattered was the fragile, intricate bond between two people who had shared a life outside the stage, a life of hardship, resilience, and quiet perseverance. How often do we overlook the humanity in those we idolize, assuming their brilliance isolates them from ordinary connection, only to realize that recognition, attention, and understanding can transform everything? Dean's eyes softened, his usual smirk tempered with the gravity of recognition, and for the first time that night, the performance became secondary, a backdrop to something far more profound.
This was no longer about entertaining the masses, about skillfully navigating expectation. It was about presence, about acknowledgement, about showing up fully for someone whose existence had demanded nothing, yet deserved everything. The contrast was stark. The public saw charisma, perfection, and composure, but behind that mask was a man capable of deep empathy, of noticing when someone else's life intersected with his in ways that mattered beyond measure. And in recognizing that person, in allowing the music to pause for a heartbeat, Dean reframed the entire night, turning it from a performance into an act of humanity. It was personal, and that personalness rippled through the room even if most did not fully understand why. The audience, sensing something shifted, felt the weight of what they could not see, their curiosity mingling with awe and silent respect. And in that quiet, suspended moment, the story deepened, not with spectacle or narrative flourish, but with the simple, undeniable truth that connection, real human connection, can redefine a moment, a memory, and sometimes a life. For Dean Martin, it was never about applause. For this person, it was never about recognition, but together, in that pause, they created a space where everything else faded, leaving only understanding, empathy, and the profound impact of being truly seen. Dean Martin could have continued. He could have let the music carry on, his voice filling the room with the same effortless charm that had always commanded attention. No one would have blamed him. The applause would have been just as loud, the performance just as polished, and the audience none the wiser. But he didn't. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the space between notes hold meaning. It was a choice.
Deliberate and conscious, one that required more courage than any perfectly timed punchline or flawless melody. What drives a man at the height of fame to interrupt everything, to step outside the rhythm of expectation, to risk the smooth cadence he has perfected for decades? Perhaps it is the recognition that some moments matter more than performance, that some people matter more than applause, that the currency of attention and presence outweighs any accolades or standing ovation. His gaze fixed on the person whose presence had disrupted the pattern, and in that look was acknowledgement, respect, and an understanding that went beyond words. Every movement he made, deliberate and measured, carried weight. The tilt of his head, the subtle lean forward, the quiet extension of his hand. It was a decision that spoke volumes about values, about the power of choosing empathy over routine, humanity over habit. In that choice, he altered the trajectory of the night, of the people involved, of the memory that would linger long after the performance ended. He chose to bridge the invisible distance between the stage and the seat, to meet presence with presence, to let significance guide his actions rather than expectation. Could one decision really have that impact? In this case, it did, and it did so quietly, powerfully, in a way that left the audience suspended, hearts quickened, breaths held, watching as a man they had admired for years demonstrated that true greatness is measured not only in talent, but in attentiveness, in moral courage, in the willingness to pause and act when the world expects you to continue. That deliberate interruption, that conscious turn toward connection, transformed a fleeting moment into a defining act, one whose influence would ripple far beyond the room, far beyond applause, and far beyond what anyone had anticipated. And in that pause, in that careful, intentional choice, the night itself shifted, the meaning deepened, and a simple act became a legacy. What happens when a single choice reverberates far beyond the room where it was made? Dean Martin's decision that night did more than interrupt a performance. It set in motion a ripple whose reach extended into lives he would never meet and into moments that had yet to unfold. That pause, that deliberate act of recognition, became more than a gesture. It became a signal that human connection, empathy, and attention carry power far greater than any song or applause. One person in a crowded theater was reminded that they were seen, that their existence mattered, that their struggles were acknowledged in a world that often overlooks quiet resilience. And that recognition did not stay confined to a single instant. It inspired others who witnessed it, directly or indirectly, to consider the weight of noticing, the impact of presence, and the quiet courage required to act when it matters most. Can a brief encounter truly change the trajectory of someone's life? History suggests that it can, when that moment carries sincerity, intention, and awareness. Dean's choice became a touchstone for generosity, for mindfulness, for prioritizing humanity over routine, and that message spread far beyond the theater walls. Years later, people would recount the story not because of the fame involved, but because of the moral elevation it exemplified, because it illustrated that one action can resonate across years, shaping decisions, inspiring compassion, and setting a standard for how to live in the light of influence. It became a lesson in noticing the small, meaningful intersections where our attention can have outsized consequences. And as that ripple spread, it reminded everyone watching that greatness is not measured solely by achievements, but by the ways in which we lift, honor, and recognize those around us, transforming ordinary moments into enduring legacies. That night, the music returned, the performance continued, and the crowd cheered. But the real performance had already occurred in the space between one human and another. A quiet, profound act that would echo through time, leaving an imprint on hearts, lives, and choices yet to be made.
The applause, never about the fame, never about the spotlight. It was about presence, about attention, about the courage to act when the world expects you not to. And in doing so, it showed that one deliberate human decision can change not only a life, but the way the world sees what it means to truly matter. Take a moment and think about what it means to truly see someone, to recognize their presence, their struggle, and their worth in a world that so often overlooks the quiet and the unseen. Dean Martin's choice that night is not just a story about a celebrity or a performance. It is a lesson that transcends time, a reminder that our actions, however small they may seem in the moment, carry weight far beyond our immediate understanding. How often do we rush through life, preoccupied with our own roles, our own agendas, assuming the spotlight is reserved only for the exceptional or the famous, when in truth it is in noticing the ordinary, the overlooked, the vulnerable, that real impact is made? That pause, that deliberate act of acknowledgement, was more than kindness. It was a demonstration of moral courage, a choice that reflected the values of empathy, attentiveness, and humanity. And what makes this story endure is not the fame of the man involved, but the universality of the moment. Any of us can choose to pause, to notice, to act when it matters, to lift someone in a way that reshapes the course of their life, even subtly. Imagine the ripple effects if we carried that awareness into our own interactions, if we recognized that recognition itself can be transformative. The moment reminds us that being truly present is more valuable than any performance, that attention and intention are gifts we can offer freely, yet whose impact can last a lifetime. This is not a tale to be filed away and forgotten. It is an invitation to reflect on how our smallest choices, our deliberate actions, can leave an imprint on others long after the spotlight moves on. The significance lies in the subtlety, in the patience, in the courage to honor humanity over routine, expectation, or convenience. And as you carry this story with you, perhaps you see opportunities in your own life to act with the same awareness, to give your presence in moments that may seem minor but are anything but. Dean Martin's pause teaches us that legacy is not built solely by achievements, but by the integrity, compassion, and attentiveness with which we navigate the world. Ask yourself, where could I pause today? Who might I truly see, fully and without distraction? These questions linger because the answers shape more than moments. They shape lives, communities, and the way we define greatness. And that is why this story matters, not only in the glow of the past, but in the choices we make now, reminding us that empathy, recognition, and the courage to act can create a resonance that lasts far beyond the stage, far beyond the applause, and far beyond what we ever thought possible.